6 people walked into the Winchester Club thinking they had a plan. 2 walked out, and the truth is, every one of them had a chance to escape London before the city turned against them. They just didn't realize it. Now, most people look at Shaun of the Dead and see a comedy with zombies in it, and fair enough. But I look at it and see one of the clearest examples of a survivable urban outbreak getting wasted by hesitation and the pull of a familiar place. Once you strip away the jokes, the pub, the banter, and the sight of a man still buying a cornetto while the world is falling apart behind him, what you're left with is a dense modern city where the roads stay open and the exits stay clear far longer than people realize, and a population that keeps misreading the danger until all the good windows to leave slam shut. And that's what makes this one worth breaking down. London doesn't get nuked, the exits aren't immediately sealed, and the army eventually restores control enough for society to come back, so the people that die here weren't dying in a world that was completely doomed. They're dying in a city that still had working roads, open escape routes, and a functioning rescue structure for anyone who recognized what they were looking for. So let's treat this collapse as an autopsy. We'll look at how this outbreak would feel to an ordinary person living in London, what they'd notice, what they'd dismiss, when they'd still have a real chance to move, and when that chance turned into improvision. Before we get into the timeline, we need to understand what London is in survival terms, because that determines everything that comes after. London is both a problem and an opportunity. It has the density to let panic, bites, and confusion spread like wildfire once the public all reacts. You've got packed neighborhoods, public transit, and a huge number of people sharing the same streets and stations. But London isn't a sealed death bowl the way other outbreak settings are. It also has suburbs, outer districts, and multiple roads and enough state capacity to create rescue windows before the city fully chokes on its own population. That gives you a very specific kind of collapse. Early on, the city is dangerous because people don't recognize the pattern. Later, it becomes dangerous because everyone recognizes at the same time. And if you've been watching my videos for a while or you're into this kind of content, then you already know what that means. We're talking mass panic and packed roads. So what kind of zombies are we dealing with here? We're talking about slow zombies, but they still carry traces of their old habits. For example, a zombified shopkeeper is seen still holding his hand out for money. Later on, Philip still reaches over to turn off the music that irritated him when he was alive. Individually, these zombies are manageable. You can outpace them at a brisk walk, shut doors on them, and put them down with blunt force, if you have to. Basically, one of these in open space is unlikely to kill you. What can kill you though is density, and what a bite does to a group, or a person. In the movie, bites don't flip someone like a switch. People stay alive for a while, then come back after death. Philip keeps talking while he's bitten. Barbara hides her bite and lasts until a few hours later. Ed is mauled badly and is still alive long enough to speak. The exact time isn't consistent when you turn, but the underlying rule is clear enough. The bite kills you, and when you die, you come back. That turns every injury into a delayed second threat. Because a group can survive the first attack, still carry the next one home in the front seat, the spare bedroom, or the back room of a shelter. So the real danger in Shaun of the Dead isn't a superhuman infected sprinting at you. It's a dense city full of ordinary people continuing normal life just long enough for a beatable threat to spread through crowds and bad shelter choices. Alright, so let's walk through your survival windows. Saturday is the day before, and it's a pre-collapse window that almost nobody would act on. If you're an average person in London on Saturday, everything would still feel normal. You're doing errands, heading to the shop, riding the bus, going to the pub, and moving through the city the way you always do. Nothing in front of you looks like the start of a full-blown urban outbreak, which is exactly why this phase is dangerous. The warning signs are there, but they arrive as isolated moments that don't quite compound into an obvious emergency scenario. Early on in the movie, Shaun sees a young woman faint, and people rush to help her. Later, he spots a scruffy man catch a pigeon and raise it towards his mouth, but a bus blocks his view before he can see more. On an evening bus ride home, the man next to him coughs badly, and the woman in the front nodded off. The news also mentions a deep space probe called Omega-6 breaking apart over southeast England. Then outside the Winchester that night, what looks like a couple making out turns out to be something far worse. But Shaun and Ed are too distracted to really register it. Those are the hints the movie is built on, and none of them are strong enough on their own to make a normal person throw a bag in the car and leave London. And the first survival window in a collapse is almost always the one people talk themselves out of, or simply don't notice. Take your pick. Either way, leaving early means acting on incomplete information. It means risking embarrassment, overreaction, wasted resources, and the possibility that you were simply overreacting to a few odd headlines. Most people would rather wait for certainty. The problem is that certainty usually arrives when it's too late. So unfortunately, Saturday isn't the window most people would use in Shaun of the Dead, but it's the phase where a careful person starts noticing that the city is producing too many odd signals at once. For the average person, this isn't a leave now window, it's a pay attention window. So if you're the type of person that pays attention, then congrats, you likely made it out here. Now comes Sunday morning, the first real escape window, the one that people can actually see. By Sunday morning, the city has changed in a way that's obvious if you actually look around and listen. The streets are too quiet, the blood on the pavement and the people outside are no longer acting like drunk people limping home from a rough night out. The whole visual language of the city has changed into something unrecognizable. That lag between what's happening and what people believe is happening is the key, and in Outbreak terms, that lag is gold, because roads are still usable, traffic hasn't collapsed into permanent gridlock, and the crowds haven't fully formed yet. The city is dangerous, but London hasn't yet become a machine that traps its own residents. The film shows you exactly how this window gets wasted. Shaun walks to the corner shop and back while the outbreak is already around him. He passes bodies, blood, shattered normality, and infected people stumbling through the street, and his brain keeps forcing all of it back into routine. He even slips on blood and keeps on moving. Then he buys a can of Diet Coke, a Cornetto, and proceeds to walk home. Basically, he's in full autopilot. People tend to miss the early phase of a crisis because routine keeps overriding what they're actually seeing. The mind keeps trying to preserve yesterday's version of the world for another 10 minutes, then for another 10, then another 10, until the cost delay becomes enormous. It's the same pattern you see in accounts of real evacuations, from hurricanes to industrial disasters, where people who had every reason to leave early describe waiting because the skies still look normal or the traffic outside still seem fine. It's a kind of delayed reaction that can put you in a terrible position. So if you leave London on Sunday morning, your odds are still good. The infected are slow, the roads are still mostly clear, and the panic wave hasn't fully hit, so you can still get distance from the urban core before the rest of the city starts doing the exact same thing at the exact same time. This is also the point where state response starts to matter. In some outbreak stories, moving towards organized force gets you screened, quarantined, or shot. I'll never advocate for blindly moving towards authority or a safe zone, because you don't know their true intentions, nor do you want to end up in a massive crowd of people. All it'll take is one infected person slipping into that crowd to unleash hell on Earth. Fortunately, in Shaun of the Dead, the army is still functioning as a rescue team, and that means moving away from the dense civilian zones and towards functioning response is rational while the response still exists. Now, let's say we missed the best window to escape. You sleep in, turn on the television, and for the first time you're seeing emergency broadcasts and public warnings. It's now clear as day. This is the most realistic survival window for the majority of people, and it arrives Sunday mid-morning. At this stage, the outbreak is no longer hidden in plain sight. It's visible. The city is openly unstable, but the reason this phase is still survivable is because the roads are just now starting to get worse without being completely backed up yet, and the infected are just starting to multiply without being absolutely everywhere. This is when a normal person can still get out. Unfortunately, Shaun does the opposite. Instead of cutting outward, he builds a retrieval plan, which goes something like this. They're taking Pete's car, going to Mum's, killing Phil, grabbing Liz, going to the Winchester, and having a nice cold pint and waiting for this all to blow over. Unfortunately, every stop burns time, and pushes him deeper into the city instead of further from it. The plan feels reasonable, which is exactly why it's dangerous. It's built around emotional logic instead of collapse logic. This is one of the hardest things for people to accept in a city failure. Once the public phase begins, driving around to collect scattered friends and relatives is how you turn one shrinking survival window into 5 separate risks. Because cars get boxed in, roads get clogged, and one bad stop risks becoming a bite that turns into an outbreak inside of your own group. And if that happens, don't be the person who hides the bite. So this is where you have to make a choice. You either keep driving deeper into the city collecting people, or you protect your ability to move. Call if you can, coordinate if you can, but once the city is unstable, every extra stop you make is burning time you need to be using to escape safely. By Sunday afternoon, London is no longer a city you can escape safely. The infected are dense enough now that ordinary travel stops being accessible. Shaun's group now has to disguise itself to shuffle through the streets just to keep moving. That's a huge shift in survival terms. Earlier, movement itself was your advantage. Now every step you take is exposure management. This is the last window where you can still try to get out safely, but your options are shrinking by the hour. You might still be able to get closer to organized rescue or find temporary shelter, but the moment of simply being able to leave is completely gone. Anyway, Shaun's group runs into Yvonne's group later on the street, and they're dealing with the same group size, the same rough resources, and an outbreak that hit both of them the same morning. The difference is direction. Shaun is moving towards the Winchester, which is really movement towards familiarity, and an emotional shelter, while Yvonne is moving towards organized help. Whether Yvonne's group makes it through the outbreak untouched is never mentioned. What it does show is that Yvonne made it out alive, because she understood what the city was turning into before Shaun did. She moved towards part of London, still trying to restore order, and Shaun moved his people into a dead end and lost almost everybody. By this phase, the question isn't just who moved, it's who moved in the right direction. Once the city reaches this point, the analysis has changed. The question shifts from when people should have left to where people would actually go after missing the escape windows, and which of those choices are going to get you killed. Your own flat is the first instinct for a lot of people, and early on it isn't the worst option. In fact, I kind of advocate for this in other videos. It's a space you know exactly what to lock down, it has walls, it has whatever food, water, and weapons you've got on hand, and it keeps you out of the streets. The problem is that flats are only good while the building around them stays quiet. Once the infection density rises, shared hallways, stairwells, and thin walls turn that flat into a bad long-term shelter. It can buy a little time, but it doesn't solve the outbreak. A car is excellent early and terrible late. Sunday morning, it gives you speed, distance, and the ability to outrun the city's slow recognition curve. By afternoon, that same car could get you trapped. A random house on the outskirts might be a ways away, but strategically, it's better than a sentimental destination in the middle of the city. You get lower population density, lower infected concentration, lower visibility, and better odds of slipping away later if rescue corridors open. It might not feel as safe as your own home, or as comfortable as a pub, but survival rarely points towards the place that's most comfortable. And then there's the Winchester. Emotionally, the Winchester makes perfect sense. Shaun knows every corner of it. The walls feel solid, there's a rifle mounted over the bar, and years of good memories are baked into this place. In collapse terms, that emotional pull is exactly what makes it such a dangerous choice in the first place. It draws Shaun back into the middle of the city, anchors the group to a fixed location, and gives them a false sense of defensibility that disappears the moment noise draws a crowd. So if you miss your exit window, you should probably choose distance over comfort. You move away from density, away from habit, and away from places your old life trained you to trust, especially if said places are located in one of the densest parts of the city. Once Shaun's group locks the door of the Winchester, every bad decision they made on the way there starts catching up to them. The noise draws the infected towards the building, and while the rifle above the bar is functional, the ammo is limited. Barbara also reveals that she was bitten hours ago, which means the group carried a delayed infection threat through every street and every stop without knowing it. And then David dies for stupidly turning his back towards a window. Ed gets mauled, and by the time they retreat underground, the group has burned through every resource they walked in with. The Winchester isn't just where the final stand happens, it's the physical expression of the survival instincts that get people killed in dense urban collapses. The instincts to go somewhere that feels safe instead of somewhere that actually improves your odds. Shaun doesn't survive because the Winchester was a good choice. He survives because the service hatch opens to an exit in the cellar, and rescue arrives before the last of their luck runs out. Now this is where Shaun of the Dead becomes useful beyond the movie itself, because the same variables show up in real crises again and again. The first variable is routine blindness. People keep interpreting the world through yesterday's patterns long after yesterday is gone. That's what Shaun does on Sunday morning, and it's what most people would do in a city that still looks half normal. The second variable is delay driven by the need for certainty. Most people won't act until the evidence is overwhelming, and by the time it's overwhelming, the window is already closing or completely slammed shut. Every hour spent waiting for proof is an hour the roads are getting worse. The third variable is false comfort. The places people trust emotionally aren't always the best place to be, not strategically at least. The familiar route, the person you need to pick up first, the pub where you've spent hundreds of Friday nights, all of that can feel like safety while still dragging you deeper into the kill zone. And the fourth variable is direction. Once escape is no longer doable, surviving depends on whether you're moving towards a lower density and organized rescue or back towards old habits. So when did you have to leave? Saturday is the pattern recognition window, or the invisible one. That's the phase where a highly cautious person might start paying attention, but almost nobody is abandoning London on a hunch that early. Not unless you got your tinfoil hat on tight. Sunday morning is the best answer. The city is visibly deteriorating, but the public reaction hasn't fully crushed your ability to move yet. If you act there, your odds are genuinely good. Sunday mid-morning is still survivable, but only if you stop wasting time. This is the realistic window for most people, and it closes pretty fast. By Sunday afternoon, clean escape is mostly over. At that point, you're choosing between the less bad option. By the time Shaun reaches the Winchester, the city's done giving him chances. That being said, Shaun of the Dead is one of the more survivable zombie outbreaks in fiction, and that's exactly why it's so brutal in its own way. The city kills people because the window stayed open just long enough for routine, hesitation, and the pull of a familiar place to waste it. Everybody remembers the laughs and the zombies in this movie, but they forget that the thing that actually filled the Winchester with bodies was every hour Shaun spent making the wrong choices. Alright guys, if you made it to the end, I appreciate that as always, and YouTube thinks you'll like this video, and if you like this video format, I got a playlist of a lot more just like it.